Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to be starting shortly. Hope you've been looking forward to the ChatGPT for Educators webinar. Hope you'll find it interesting. It's going to be a lot of theory behind it and what you can do, as well as some practical examples as well. We'll start in a moment. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar titled ChatGPT for Educators. My name is Sean Swartz. We've got lots to cover today, so we're going to jump straight into it. We are live on YouTube, and we have made the comments facility available for you to post questions. So please feel free to type in your questions in the comments facility. We will be monitoring these questions, and we will try our best to ensure that we answer your questions throughout the presentation. We hope we'll have enough time to do that as well. It is a long and hopefully very interesting presentation. So I'm excited to talk to you about ChatGPT for Educators. In this presentation, I'll introduce to you ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a language model that has been developed by OpenAI. OpenAI is a company that's actually backed by both Microsoft as well as, believe it or not, Elon Musk. And we'll explain how it can be used in education. We'll cover its capabilities, use cases, best practices, as well as some examples. So let's get straight into it. Before we jump straight into the actual presentation, I've got a request. If you have used ChatGPT, please like our video so we can identify who has used it. If you haven't used ChatGPT yet, in the comments facility, just type no, just so that we can get a good feel as to who has and who hasn't used ChatGPT. So as an introduction, first let's talk about what is ChatGPT. It's a very powerful language model. It was developed by OpenAI. It's designed to generate human-like text based on a given prompt or conversation. And the model has been trained on a massive amount of data from the internet, which makes it capable of producing text that is both coherent and contextually appropriate, but at the same time, also give you incorrect information. We're going to discuss in a great detail about the context that you give in your questions to ChatGPT, but we'll get there. Let's discuss firstly, what can ChatGPT actually do? So one thing it can do is to help you generate personalized learning materials, which is, I think, a great start from an education perspective. You can input a topic or a subject, and ChatGPT will generate a relevant, context-specific text that can be used as study materials for your students. ChatGPT can also help you answer questions in real time, which can be especially useful in a remote learning environment. Just as a reminder, we are live on YouTube. Please make your questions or put your questions in the comments facility. And I really want to make this presentation, other than the theory component, as practical as possible and as interactive as possible. So I'm inviting you right now to join me in the practical example that we will be doing shortly. In order to do that, if you would like to join me, please type in your email address right now into the comments facility. We will randomly select a few of you to join me on stage. Well, not really on stage, on Zoom. And we will email you the link to join Zoom so that you can join us in this practical and really useful ChatGPT webinar. While we're doing that, let's discuss some use cases. So in the education world, the first one is personalized learning. As I mentioned earlier, ChatGPT can generate personalized learning materials. You can input a topic and ChatGPT will generate relevant materials based on that specific topic. The second thing that it can be used for, and very important, is homework and assignments. You can use ChatGPT to create homework and assignments for your students. This can be especially helpful if you're short on time, which I think most teachers are, and if you're teaching a subject for the first time. And lastly, questions and answers. ChatGPT can help you answer student questions in real time. This is really useful in a remote learning environment where students may not have access to a teacher immediately. Let's discuss some best practices. So firstly, ChatGPT responses are generated based on the data it has been trained for. It's important to use trusted resources when inputting information into ChatGPT to ensure that the information it gives you is accurate and reliable. And to do that, the most important thing is context. Context matters, and that's what it's all about. And in the practical component, that's what we are going to be focusing on. So let's just discuss context. ChatGPT generates responses based on the context it's given. It's important to provide enough context so that ChatGPT can generate accurate responses. Here's some tips, and we'll use these tips in the practical example as well. So firstly, be specific. The more specific your question is, the more accurate the response is likely to be. Please really try and avoid vague or open-ended questions, as this can lead to a broad range of potential answers. And instead of focusing on a particular topic, you need to actually focus on a particular concept within that topic to get as much detail as possible. Use clear language. ChatGPT is trained already to understand and respond to natural language. However, you need to be very clear and very concise in your question. Don't use jargon, but at the same time, don't use very technical terms that may be unfamiliar to the model, and try and avoid using overly complex language. Just ask it in general, plain English, what it is that you want. And also, very important is avoid asking questions that contain assumptions or bias, as this will definitely lead to inaccurate or misleading responses from ChatGPT. So if your question requires specific background information or context, give it. Don't just ask the question. Give as much information to ChatGPT when you're asking the question. Give it background information. This will help the model better understand the question and generate for you a more accurate response. And stay on topic. Don't change topics in the middle of your question and focus. ChatGPT is trained on a very wide range of topics, but stay on topic with your question. By following these tips, I can guarantee you that ChatGPT will generate accurate and helpful responses to your questions. Ensuring responsible use by your students is just as important. You don't want students just playing with ChatGPT without knowing what your expectations are. Before I continue with the theory component of this presentation, Lindsay, can I just ask you about our volunteers? Are we making progress over there?
Not yet. If anyone would like to volunteer and doesn't want to post their email address, they're welcome to just say they'd like to volunteer, and I'll look up the email address for them.
Okay, please. I mean, a big component to this presentation is the live practical component. I need people to actually interact with for the live component, otherwise it's not going to work as well as we're hoping. So please, 1 or 2 or 3 people volunteer. While we wait, ensuring responsible use by students. So it's really important that students don't abuse ChatGPT and use it to generate inappropriate or even inaccurate information. So here's some best practices to ensure responsible use by students. Number 1, set clear expectations. Make sure that students understand the appropriate use of ChatGPT and the consequences of misuse. You should monitor their usage. Keep an eye on how students are using ChatGPT to ensure they're using it appropriately, and provide feedback. Give feedback to students on their use of ChatGPT to help them learn how to use it responsibly. So an example of inappropriate use, firstly, students generating fake news. Fake news is really not a great thing on the internet, and Facebook has been struggling with it for a very long time. We don't need students generating additional fake news through ChatGPT, but more important is plagiarism. Explain to your students the consequences of plagiarism and why it is so important to avoid plagiarism in the first place. Critical thinking skills is what ChatGPT is all about. ChatGPT can and will help improve students' critical thinking skills by prompting them to question the information it generates. Critical thinking skills are essential for success in today's complex and rapidly changing world. So I want to just discuss a few examples of critical thinking skills and how we at Learn A Lot use that all the time. So the first one is we actually have an online self-paced NBT prep course specifically designed for maths. What does this prep course do? Well, we recognize the importance of passing the NBTs and getting into university and to study medicine and whatever else it may be with the NBTs. And so we Learn A Lot, together with Professor Michael Glencross, have developed an online NBT maths course specifically focused on helping students achieve the necessary scores for university acceptance. The course is designed to help students answer non-routine problems in multiple choice format. So for example, problem solving and modeling, basic trig, data handling, but most important, the competent use of logical skills. And this boils down to critical thinking skills. That is what it's all about. And may I ask that everyone that's just joined it, if they can just mute themselves And thank you for joining us. You're going to be a great help very shortly. Another one of our self-paced courses that we believe helps tremendously in critical thinking is a course called Mind Play Reading Ultra. It's a virtual reading program that adapts to each student's reading level and provides remediation and acceleration in phonics, grammar, fluency, and most important, comprehension. This course dramatically helps improve critical thinking skills. And these critical thinking skills is what the world is all about going forward. If you need to know information, if there's any knowledge that you need to know, you ask Google. These days, if there's a skill, if you need to write a letter, you ask ChatGPT. But most important is the critical thinking skills, because that is what is going to be required for every single job out there going forward. And so, if you're interested in any of these courses, feel free to email us on info@learnalot.com, and we will provide more information to you. One other course that we also focus on in a big way is the GED. It's all critical thinking based, and it's really designed for students that are really struggling with traditional schooling. And so if you have students that are struggling and are looking for alternatives, we can help you in a school environment, staying within the school, still generating your school fees, students still wearing their school uniform, but participating in an alternative. Speak to us, we can definitely help you with that. And just by the way, for the GED exams, if anybody tries to learn anything off by heart, we guarantee them that they will fail, because learning off by heart is not what the GED is all about. It's all 100% critical thinking based. Now, fact checking can also, in a big way, help your students improve their critical thinking skills. How? Well, you can encourage students to fact check the information that ChatGPT actually generates. They can use other sources to confirm or even refute the information that ChatGPT generates. And most important is understanding the context. We've discussed context a lot over the last couple of minutes, and ChatGPT generates responses solely based on the context that it is given. And we'll see why that happens in a moment. So we highly encourage students to analyze the context of the information that they provide ChatGPT to understand the information that it generates for them. And so I know I've spoken about critical thinking skills a lot, but in summary, students will be better equipped to navigate a complete and complex information environment if they improve their critical thinking skills. So just before we jump into our practical example, I want to discuss a few examples of questions that you can use in your classroom and in assignments for home use, for homework, that can really force the students to think out of the box and not just use Google or ChatGPT to get their answer. So in order to prevent students from misusing ChatGPT to generate their homework, you can definitely adapt your questions to make them more open-ended and require critical thinking. So here's some strategies. Number one, instead of asking straightforward questions, you can provide scenarios or case studies that require students to analyze and synthesize information. So for example, instead of simply asking something like, what is the capital of France? which Google and ChatGPT will answer in 1 second, you can present a scenario where, let's say, a French family is visiting a foreign country and needs to communicate with locals in the local language. Ask students to rather analyze the scenario, synthesize their knowledge of the French culture, geography, language, and everything else, and then ask them to provide the most effective way for that family to communicate. And that would definitely help and force students to think out of the box, think critically, and not be able to use ChatGPT for simple questions. Another way is to use problem-solving questions. So design questions that require students to apply their knowledge to solve problems or to complete tasks. This encourages students to engage with the material and apply, once again, apply their critical thinking skills. Use research questions. So encourage students to conduct independent research, to open and ask open-ended questions. This helps them build research skills and foster a deeper understanding of the subject matter. And you can also use reflection questions. So ask a student to reflect on what they've learned and to provide their own opinions or interpretations. This will encourage them to think critically about the material and to develop their own ideas. So in summary, by adapting your questions in this way, you can encourage students to engage with the material and develop their critical thinking skills, while also, at the same time, preventing them from misusing ChatGPT to simply generate homework answers. So I'm sure this is probably the part that most of you have been expecting and waiting for. And so we are going to be discussing and doing a practical example. So Kirsty and Bridget, thank you so much for volunteering. What we're going to do is actually jump straight into ChatGPT. So I'm going to load it up. And then I will share my screen. There we go. So this is ChatGPT. This is the website for ChatGPT. This is where we ask context-related questions to ChatGPT. Don't just ask the simple questions. Let's say, for example, what language do they speak in France? That's really such a simple question, and it's really not something that ChatGPT should be used for. It's like that can be used, and you can use Google for that. So I'd like to invite Bridget. Bridget and Kirsty. I don't know what subjects you teach. Bridget, maybe you want to just start off, tell us what subjects you teach, and let's choose a topic to create a practical example of how to really use ChatGPT properly. Please feel free to unmute yourselves and answer the questions. I don't know what subjects you teach. Bridget, maybe you want to just start off.
Hi.
What subjects you teach.
Hello, Bridget. Yes, I teach English first language.
First language. Okay, can I just ask you to turn your YouTube off? We just got some
Sure.
background. Please feel free to unmute yourselves. And Kirsty, what do you teach?
I teach physical sciences.
Okay, excellent. So we've got a variety going over here. What grades, Bridget, for your English?
8 to 12.
Okay, so what's the set work in grade 12 this year that you're doing?
We're busy with the Tempest.
Tempest. Okay, so we could very simply start and say to ChatGPT, let's start and show you what a question that shouldn't be asked. So let's ask ChatGPT to write a summary of 150 words from the set work, The Tempest. Let's have a look what it does. It's giving us some information, but it's really very, very basic. Anyone, I would hope, any one of the students would be able to do something like that. But let me show you how I would personally adapt this, and just to show you the functionality that is available in ChatGPT. And then I'd like you to also just provide some more feedback from your perspective as to how you would want to adapt this, and where you see this maybe not even working as well as you would think it would work. So just to give you an understanding, ChatGPT understands and chats to us in a conversation. And so it's given us 3 paragraphs. I could ask ChatGPT to do the following: rewrite the second paragraph using humor. So there we go. It's just rewritten that, and it's understood what I want. Bridget, what type of questions that would you like, or how would you want to adapt these questions and see what?
So, Sean, I have messed about a little with this. For example, I asked ChatGPT to to create a topic for me, for example, of a layered question that I could give my grade 12s in the Tempest, and it came up with really good examples. And then I've asked it to write those essays, and it wrote an excellent essay, which is something, of course, we'd never give our pupils, because that's just going to write it for them. And that's obviously not what we're looking for ChatGPT for our kids.
Correct. So we're not looking to ask them to simply write an essay, because, as you say, ChatGPT can easily do that for you. So how would you change that question around so that the students find it a lot more difficult to use ChatGPT in the questions that you would provide them?
Well, that's why I'm here. I was hoping you could give me some examples.
Okay.
So what I have suggested to my learners is that they do their essay topic. I give them a topic, they do it. And what I have encouraged them to do, for example, is to put their essay topic into ChatGPT and then say, assess this essay and suggest improvements. Because I don't mind if they're looking to edit their work and to find a way to improve their work, and then to see what ChatGPT has told them, and to take the changes they feel are relevant and to ignore those that are not.
Exactly the thing. So the way that a lot of teachers have started using ChatGPT, both at home and in the classroom, is actually saying to the student, ask for the summary, and this is the summary that ChatGPT is given, but then to literally critique it and mark ChatGPT's essay as if they were the teacher, so that they can learn from that what they should be or shouldn't be doing with their own essays when they do start writing them. And ChatGPT does write well, but it doesn't always write really well. But when you ask the questions and using a lot of context for the questions, it can make a huge, huge difference. So let me give another example, just briefly, if anyone hasn't used ChatGPT, just to show you what it can do. We can even ask it to say, well, translate the third paragraph into Afrikaans. Now, if there's any Afrikaans teachers out there, you'll be able to identify whether it's actually written it well enough in Afrikaans. And so what I want to really show you here is that it's easy for ChatGPT to understand what we're looking for and have a conversation with it and to keep writing it. But context is very, very important, as we've said. So if I had to ask a student to do something in English, let's say, we could ask it to write a poem about a sunrise. And after that, we would then ask the students to critique this poem and identify what's good and what's bad about the poem. And by doing that, it's forcing the students to also identify what really, I guess, part of the rubric that you would be using for marking purposes, what it is that they need to critique themselves on relating to the poem. Kirsty, from a science perspective, have you used ChatGPT at all?
So I've tried it out a bit, but mostly for the junior grades where there's a bit more content. And I've also tried asking it to create a worksheet on scientific notation, see what it came up with there. And with the grade 8 natural sciences, I've asked it to create a worksheet on ecology just to see what it came up with there.
Okay, so let's work on ecology for a moment. Let's say create 5 questions about ecology for a grade 8 student. Now, it's all very well and simple to do this, and the questions may be good, they may not be good. But to show you how you can continue and use it further, you could actually say, provide answers to these questions. So you don't only have to ask the questions, it can even write the answers for you. And you can use these as model answers, or you can adapt them slightly. And the beauty of ChatGPT, when you're creating these types of worksheets, is that it's really easy to use the information. And how do you do that? Well, you can simply go here and highlight what it is that you're looking for, and you can choose to copy it and paste it into a Word document or Google Doc document that you're using, and create and continue creating the worksheets. We've used it a lot to actually create learning material as well, not just the worksheets. So, for example, if I had to ask it to explain what ecology is for a grade 8 student, that's a really simple question. Now, if we wanted to adapt the question slightly to show you the different ways of interacting with ChatGPT, you could say, pretend you are an expert scientist. Now, explain what ecology is for a grade 8 student. And it will explain it in a different way. And this is all about the context and adding more and more context into information that you are looking to generate. And you can see it's really quick and easy to do this, and it works really well. Bridget, from your side, do you have any questions? Is there anything that you would like to see?
There is something that I would just like to say.
Yes.
It's not infallible, as we know. One of the poems that we do in Matric is called Discardment by Alan Paton. And so I typed in, write the analysis on the poem Discardment. And within the normal 3 seconds, it gave me a lovely analysis. But in fact, it wasn't based on Paton's poem. It was on another poem called Discardment. It did not recognize Paton at all. And so the learners need to be aware of that, or we also need to be aware of that. And I don't know why it never recognized Paton, but it did a lovely analysis, but it wasn't of my poem.
So that's really part and parcel of what I spoke about earlier, where I said that the students need to verify the information that ChatGPT gives them. It's really important. It is going to make mistakes. And it makes mistakes all the time, by the way. Why does it make mistakes? Because the information that it's got is from the internet. And the internet has lots and lots of incorrect information all over the place. And so it's not always going to be accurate as they expect it to be. But I think what's I think just to summarize it again, we need to start changing the way we ask questions to the students, because the students are already using ChatGPT. And if they're not, they will be very shortly. And so we have to change the way we ask the questions so that it isn't easy for them to use ChatGPT, because we don't want them to use it. ChatGPT is not available for them when they're sitting in their matric exam. And so it's an amazing tool that can be used. It can be used in so many different ways. We use it in our business all the time. We give it a paragraph. Let's do a simple example here. And just to show you why I'm going to do this, write a Twitter post on the Tempest using and include hashtags. Now, just asking it like that is not going to give a lot of information, but let's have a look and then we can improve on it. There's a post that we can use. Now, we could ask it to adapt it accordingly. We could say, well, shorten the post and exclude Arial. So as you can see, it really understands all the English that we provide it, and it understands what we're looking to do. And as you use ChatGPT more and more, from your perspective, you will get better at it. You're going to learn more about the tricks that you can use to ask it to do certain things. But I think from our perspective, we need to embrace it. It's not going away. It's only going to get better. And so we need to use it, and we need to include it in the tests, and we need to include it in the classrooms. I saw a post on Facebook recently where an English teacher at a school actually did it in the classroom. Obviously, these kids have cell phones, and they said to them, and they're not usually allowed to use them, but she asked them to actually take their cell phones out and ask them to ask ChatGPT on their cell phones to write a little paragraph, and then in class, part of their project and their working in the classroom was to actually critique what ChatGPT had done and then present it to the class. So that was a really nice class tasks that they could do that incorporated ChatGPT, but they could use it for the positive rather than just for plagiarism, which we really don't want to do. And I just want to touch on plagiarism for a moment. I'm going to let Bridget say what she wanted to say. And that is plagiarism is so important. We need to stay away from it as much as possible. We need to explain to students that they need to stay away from it. Paraphrasing is so easy. We can even say, paraphrase this tweet, and we've done it. But these AI systems are getting really, really clever. And in fact, ChatGPT, the parent company, OpenAI, have actually already released a tool, and we will include a link to this tool in an email that we will send to all the attendees of this webinar, that this tool can take text, and it can take this tweet, or whatever it may be, and it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's designed to tell you as a teacher whether whatever was written, whatever you provide this tool, whether it's actually being plagiarized or not. And the way it does it is it will say to you whether it was not really plagiarized, but whether it was written by a human being or whether it was written by an AI tool itself. It's not always accurate. I've caught it out many a time, but it is definitely a tool that you as educators should also be using, so that when students do submit their work, and obviously you'll ask them to submit their work electronically and not on paper, so that you can easily copy and paste it into this tool, and within 1 second you'll know with quite a high level of confidence whether the paragraph that you're providing was actually written by a robot or whether it was written by a human being. Bridget, you wanted to say something?
I wanted to say that in our discussions in our department, not only are we going to have to change the way in which we question, but we are going to have to change the way we assess. So all of our essays actually will now have to go back into the classroom handwritten, because we can no longer trust that they will be done. But I don't mind if they bring in some notes, and if they ever ask ChatGPT to give them a summary or give them the key quotes from The Tempest, and they use that in their essay, that I don't mind at all if they've taken the trouble to do that, because the essay is still going to be their own essay.
Yes, and part of using ChatGPT, they're actually learning, so that when they do write the essay, they will be able to write a better essay at the same time. It's just like a calculator. We used to have calculators. We never used to allow them to use calculators. Now we do. Why? Because we've changed the way we question. It doesn't matter if the maths answer is correct or not. It's how they've gotten to the answer that is most important. And that is really what you're saying as well, is that you're flipping the way we teach, but now you're also flipping the way we assess. So just like flipped classrooms 15 years ago and 10 years ago and 5 years ago became a thing to use in an online environment where you could really give students homework, and their homework was to watch a video or to learn something and teach themselves. And then in the classroom, you would do instead of teaching them, you would actually have a conversation with them so that they would then get to know and learn the content better. Same thing applies here. They're going to be preparing for their essay at home rather than writing the essay at home, and then they'll write the essay in class. And I have no doubt it's going to be done in multiple subjects, not just in English, but English and Afrikaans, obviously, things like that are really going to be impacted in a big way. And it's a great tip for everybody to understand that the way you have to assess needs to change, and you need to start thinking about it and changing the way you assess and teach. Just to give or quote a teacher as well, we provided a live presentation very similar to this a couple of weeks ago at a school. The teachers up front were telling me that that ChatGPT is not accurate, it can't do what they need it to do. If the students use it, they're going to know straight away. And they were really feeling that it was a waste of time and not a great tool to use. An hour later, after our presentation, one of the senior teachers stood up, and I will quote the teacher. The teacher said, "I am petrified," because they realized that they're going to have to change, as you said, Bridget, both the way you have to teach and the way you assess. And so for the teachers that have been teaching for many years, this is going to take them out of their comfort zone. It's going to force you guys to change the way you teach and the way you assess. For the younger teachers, I think you're going to embrace it. It needs to be used. It's really an amazing tool. It's not the only tool. Microsoft have obviously invested in ChatGPT. It's going to be a big part of their business going forward. But Google have got their own version of this. And I don't know if you've seen recently that there's so many AI tools that have popped up out there. Most of them, believe it or not, actually are not AI tools in themselves, in their own right. They actually leverage off the ChatGPT engine to produce what you see them advertising. So it's really good to be using ChatGPT going forward. Kirsty, is there anything you want to add or comment on? Ask us to adapt or do a question before we continue?
No, thank you. I'm happy.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, firstly, Bridget and Kirsty, thank you so much for contributing. It makes it a lot easier. Initially, we weren't expecting so many people to attend this webinar, and we were going to do it all on Zoom. But when so many people showed interest, we had to switch it around. What we would like to do is just jump back into our presentation, summarize a few really important tips and tricks that you'll be able to use.
Sean, I've also sent you some very important questions that have come through to your chat, if you don't mind checking.
Okay, yes. So Lindsay, in a few moments, we will jump to questions. I just want to finish a few very important things. So we've done our practical example. I want to show you something here. This is something that we at Learn a Lot actually created. It's a free, simpler way of accessing ChatGPT. It's available to anybody. Simply take this number down, 078-441-0688. Add it as a contact on your phone and send it a WhatsApp. Send a WhatsApp a question, and what it will do is it will actually answer your question straight away. Instead of having to log into ChatGPT on the web, because logging into ChatGPT on the web requires you to register, verify your email address, log in, and half the time ChatGPT is too busy. It's and you'll notice that a lot, and it will tell you that it's not available now because it's being used by too many people. So we've really bypassed all of that and created a WhatsApp channel for ChatGPT. It is free. You're welcome to use it. And when I describe the experience in the classroom with the teacher, when the students took out their cell phones, none of them were registered for ChatGPT. And if they were registered, they weren't logged in on their cell phone. And so they used this number to send questions to ChatGPT. It does have one limitation at the moment, and that is that it can't have a conversation, meaning you can only ask it one question. If you ask it to adapt a paragraph on an answer that it has given you, it's not going to understand that. You're going to have to provide the whole paragraph and then ask it to adapt it using copy and paste. It's a great tool. It's a great thing to use just by wherever you are to ask it a question, just send the question to it. We've also added something that isn't available in ChatGPT in general, and that is to draw pictures. So if you send this number a question, you can say #draw, and then a description of what you want. So you can say #draw an oil painting with a background of the sea, together with 3 dolphins jumping in the waves, or whatever it may be, and it will generate quite a nice picture for you most of the time. If you want to use the proper ChatGPT web login, you will simply have to go to chat.openai.com, and you'll have to create an OpenAI account. It is free. You can register your email address. You'll have to verify your email address. You'll have to accept the terms and conditions from ChatGPT, and then you can start writing questions. Often you'll be told that you don't have access because it's too busy. If you do want to override that, they do have a facility where you can subscribe for $20. It's about 2 gazillion rand these days. And for those $20, you will have access to ChatGPT at all times. Lindsay, before we get to our conclusion, what are those questions that you wanted to ask us?
Great, thanks so much. So the first one is, if you're able to discuss GPT-0, the new plagiarism checker for ChatGPT.
Yeah, so I did mention it briefly, that ChatGPT or OpenAI themselves have come out with a plagiarism tool. We don't have much time left, so what we will do is, I'm assuming everyone that's on this webinar did register with us, which means that we have your email address. In the next day or so, we will email everybody a recording of this entire webinar, but we will also include how to access the plagiarism checker from ChatGPT so that you can use it in your assessing and make sure that the students haven't simply just copied and pasted from ChatGPT.
Thanks. And another one is, if you type in the same question, will it always give the same response, or does it give a unique response each time?
That's the scary thing, is that the vast majority of the time, it is going to give you a unique answer. And so it makes it more difficult for you as teachers because it's not going to be the same answer, and it's not going to be so easy to identify that the students have used ChatGPT.
Yeah, and then it seems very biased towards Western texts over South African or African texts. That it's just a comment.
Well, the reality is that ChatGPT gets its information from the internet. So it's not being biased, it's receiving the information. And so there's obviously, the internet in general will have a lot more information from America and Europe and all those poems that Bridget mentioned from those countries rather than from Africa. I guess we can look at it as a positive and an advantage from our perspective, in that the students won't always be able to use it if there's not enough information that ChatGPT has received when it was learning everything. Just, I think, very briefly, let me explain what is it? How does it do it? Where does it get the information from? So in general, how does AI work? Or how does artificial intelligence work? It works on historical information. So you will give an AI engine, let's say, 1 million lines or sentences of information, of data. It will use that data and it will process that data so that it's got it in its, call it, memory banks. Then what you do is you tell the AI engine that for this question, this is the answer. And you'll give it a whole range of different answers written in different ways. And by doing that, you're teaching the engine what the answers are for a question. And from that moment onwards, the AI engine will be able to use that question and those answers that you've taught it to generate very similar answers using the data that it has received. And that is why AI really is a predictive process, in that given a certain amount of data, it can make a prediction. But what ChatGPT have done is that they've taken it one step further, and using language models, they've actually taken those predictions and converted it into sentences, which it's then giving to you.
Great.
Any other questions?
No, that was the majority of them.
Okay, so I think firstly, those are our contact details if you want to chat to us in any way. We won't be using ChatGPT to answer your emails. So just in conclusion, very briefly, ChatGPT is a very powerful tool that can be used in education to generate personalized learning materials, create homework, create assignments, as well as answers to students' questions. It's really, really important to use ChatGPT responsibly. You need to monitor its results. As we saw, and as Bridget mentioned, it's not always correct. You have to monitor the results and ensure that they are used responsibly. ChatGPT can help students improve and will help students improve their critical thinking skills by making them prompt correctly when asking questions. And by adapting your questions to prevent the misuse and encouraging critical thinking, you as educators can definitely help students develop their skills they need to navigate the complex information environments that we find ourselves in and to make informed decisions. I hope this presentation has been useful. It's very new to all of us. If there are any other questions, we do have 2-3 minutes left in our webinar that we're happy to answer questions. And then after that, thank you very much for attending. Bridget and Kirsty for contributing, and we will be emailing everybody, as I said, the recording and the details about the plagiarism tool that ChatGPT has provided, also free of charge. Okay, so thank you everybody for attending. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you again.